rendered. Means to some extent React.memo has helped us to stop the unnecessary re-rendering. Now we will discuss that how exactly this React.memo worked, for which components it worked, and for which component it did not work. So now tell me, when I increase the marks, did this component get re-rendered? The first, is it getting re-rendered? The title component? No, right? So let us first see that how come React.memo worked exactly correct on the title component. So what is this React.memo? React.memo is a higher order component. So what this component does is, whatever component you are passing inside it, it checks whether this component has any change in state or props. So now tell me, does this component has any props, any states? No, right? There are no states, there are no props. So there is no point in discussing about change in props or change in states. Why? Because it doesn't have any. So that is why React.memo worked absolutely fine over the title component. So what it did, since there is no change in the values of title, what it did is it stored the title component in a temporary memory, like your cache memory. What it does, it stores this component in its temporary memory so that there is no need to re-render this again and again. Once it is rendered, this React.memo will memorize it. It will store it in the temporary memory so that there is no need of re-rendering of this title component. So that is why it worked fine on the title. Why? Because there were no change in states and props here. That is why React.memo could easily skip the re-rendering of title component. Now let us go next to the count component. Now how it worked? Okay, let us see whether it worked on count or not. So if you see, I had made the change in marks. So rendering count component for marks is acceptable. Okay, it is acceptable. Why? Because I made changes in it. Next, increase in marks. Yes, acceptable. Why? Because I made use of it. But now tell me, is this component getting re-rendered? Did it get re-rendered? The count component for percent. Give me a second. Okay, sorry, I had a call from my manager. Okay, fine. So what I was discussing is, if you look at this, the count component for percent, you can observe that this count component for percent has not got re-rendered. Okay, so which means what can I say, that react.memo has worked on this as well. So let us see how did it work on this. Okay, let us discuss on count component now. So as usual, what this react.memo does, whatever component is passed, it checks whether there is any change in the props compared to the last re-rendering. Okay, compared to the last render. So tell me, what was the previous value of this prop before change in marks? Was it 80? Before changing in marks, I'm asking, was it 80? Yes, it was 80 only, correct. And after changing the marks also, it is the same. That is 80. So since there was no change in the props observed, so that is why react.memo stored it in a temporary memory and it skipped the re-rendering of count component. Okay, that is why it was able to skip the re-rendering of count. Why? Because there was no change in props here for the percent. Similarly, okay, we will do vice versa. What we will do now, I have refreshed my page. Let me clear the console. Now I will increase the percent. Okay, let us increase percent. So if you see, if I increase percent, this memoization as usual, the rendering of this is skipped because there is no change in props here. So react.memo has skipped its re-rendering. But talking about marks, can you see the count component for marks is not re-rendered? Why? Because before changing percent it was 75, and even after changing percent it is the same 75. So that is why the re-rendering of count component is skipped for the marks now. Why? Because I made a change in count component for percent, so only that component will get re-rendered. And in this way, successfully it has prevented the re-rendering of count component. So what can I conclude from this? We can conclude that react.memo, okay, react.memo, it works on pure components. Now what do you mean by pure components? Do you know what is a pure function? Okay, no worries, I will explain you what is a pure function. Okay, so let us assume, okay, let us assume that I am having a function for addition. Okay, I've made a function for addition and I have two parameters for that function. Okay, so those two parameters are a comma b. So suppose if I'm using that function today and I'm passing an argument to it as 1 comma 2. Okay, so it will return me 3. Okay, because I'm returning addition from that function. So now tell me, if I use the same function after 10 days with the same arguments, okay, I'm passing the same arguments 1 comma 2, so will I get the same output from that function after 10 days also? Will I get same output, that is 3? The condition is I am passing the same arguments. Okay, the condition is what? I am passing the same arguments. So this kind of function is called as a pure function. What is the meaning of pure function? If you pass the same arguments for today, for tomorrow, or n number of times, if you are passing the same arguments and if you're getting back the same output, so such kind of function is called as a pure function. Then what is impure function? Let us take the same example. What I have done, I'm using the same function, but whatever output I'm getting, for that output, I am applying math.random. Do you know what is math.random? Math.random method. what it will do is it will generate random numbers. So now tell me, if I am passing an argument as 1 comma 2 today, so I'll get one output. Okay, and remember that output will be generated using math.random. And even after 10 days I will give the same arguments, that is 1 comma 2, but will I get the same output which I was getting 10 days before after using math.random? No, right? So these kind of functions are called as impure functions. Why? Because what is the definition? What you can say, that if you are passing the same arguments and if you are getting the same output, so such kind of functions are called as pure functions. For same arguments, same output. But if, so for same arguments, if you're not getting the same output, so such kind of functions are called as impure functions. Same definition applies for your component. If you are sending the same props to a component and if it is giving you the same output, such kind of components are called as pure components. For example, if before changing of percent I am sending a prop as 75, correct, so I am getting output as 75. Even after changing percent, same marks I'm sending 75, again I'm getting 75. So this is also like a pure component. If I am sending 75 today, or even if I am sending 75 after 10 days, I know that I'll be getting 75 displayed on UI. Okay, so this is how the react.memo works on a pure component. First, it works for a component which does not have prop at all, and second, it works for the pure components where there is no change in props. Okay, when there is no change in props seen as compared to the previous render, so that time react.memo works. But left one thing is left out now. I don't know if you have observed or not. Let me just clear this now. If I increase the marks, okay, so re-rendering of marks component, acceptable. Re-rendering of button component for marks, acceptable. But what about this? Did I use button for percent? No, right? I did not use the button for increasing percent. But still, what has happened? Still, it has got re-rendered, which means that react.memo is not completely able to memoize button comp. Why? Because react.memo must be finding some change in props. Okay, but actually if you observe here, there are no change in prop, the same function is sent again and again. But why it is not able to detect that? Because when it is re-rendering the component, what happens? React is not able to understand that these are the same functions. It feels that every time a different function is sent to this as a prop, but it is not the case. This, even though the same function is passed, what this button comp feels or what this react.memo feels is every time a different function is coming into this component. So that is why it is not able to memorize this component. So then what to do now? We have to tell this react.memo that the same function is sent, there is no change in the function. So for that purpose we have a different memoization technique. One more memoization technique we have, that is called as use callback. Use callback, this is a memoization technique, one more memoization technique which is used to memoize a function. It is used to memoize a function. Now see how, or what is this use callback saying? Let us see now. What I will do is I will just comment this. Okay, and let me rewrite the same function as increase marks, and let me tell you the syntax. Now the syntax of use callback is very similar to the syntax of use effect. Just now we have studied, today itself we have studied the use effect. So what will be the first argument if it is similar to use effect? First will be callback function, correct? And the second will be array of dependency. Syntax is similar, but the functioning is different. The way it works is different. Okay, first of all, what you do is, before this, please execute react.memo and check now if there is a difference. Previously 5 will get re-rendered and now 3 will get re-rendered. Please do this first, everyone. Give react.memo for title, count and button com for the 3 components. Come on, do it. And once you do, please tell me. Give react.memo for title, count and button comp and then check your output. If only 3 components getting re-rendered now. And give me a confirmation if it is done. Is it done? Did you give react.memo? Okay, I hope it is working for you. Now you are getting only 3 components re-rendered. Okay, now let us come back to this callback, use callback. So what this use callback is doing, let us see. Now what I have done is I have commented the previous function and I am rewriting this with the help of use callback. Okay, call the use callback hook, name the function again. Okay, the same function you should name, and to this you should assign use callback hook, and then you pass one arrow function here. Okay, and whatever logic you were writing in the function, the same logic write it inside the function of use callback. Okay, that is marks plus 1. Now second argument, what is the second argument? Second argument is the array of dependency. So what you have to do now? Okay, you don't want this function to get rewritten. Actually it is reread. It is reread, that is why it is saying, it is feeling, react.memo feels that the function is changing here. Okay, the prop for function is changing here, so we have to store it temporarily so that it is not mistaken. So okay, so depending on what, now tell me, when do we need this function? Whenever we want to change, make change in, when do we need this function which I have highlighted? Whenever we want to make a change in marks, correct? So just pass your marks, give the dependency value as marks, which means what? This use callback is instructing this function. This use callback, what it will do, it will store this function as its temporary memory. It will memoize this function so that it is skipping the rereading of the function, so that this function is not mistaken as a change in function, or it is not repeatedly reread here. So what it will do, the use callback will store it in a temporary memory until and unless there is a change in marks. It will only be shown whenever the marks has to be changed. Similarly for the second function also, let me comment this previous one and let us rewrite the function increase percent, and you just have to assign your use callback. Okay, assign use callback and pass one arrow function, callback function here, and rewrite the logic that you had written before, that is percent plus 1. And now you should give the dependency value for this function. So now tell me, this function should be dependent on which value? It should depend on, yes, it should depend on the percent value, which means the use callback is going to store this function in its temporary memory. This use callback is going to store this function as a cache, or it will memoize this function and it will regenerate the function until and unless there is a change in percent. Now let us see how does it make a change in our re-rendering. Okay, so for the first time everyone will get re-rendered fine. Let me clear the console. Now if I make a change in marks, can you see now react.memo is working fine for the button component as well, because I made a change in marks. So this is acceptable, rendering component for marks. And as I'm using the marks button, so this rendering button comp for marks is also acceptable. Similarly, if I make a change in percent, you can see only the count component for percent is changing, as well as only the button com for percent has got re-rendered. So understood how this memoization worked for skipping the re-rendering, unnecessary re-renderings. Okay, come on, execute this for use callback. And remember, use callback also comes from your React library. Do not forget to import use callback. Okay, even use callback comes from the React library. Okay, come on, execute this use callback, this part. Remember, CRUD is going to be the last topic of your React CRUD operation. Okay, done. Fine. Then Lakshmi, is it done? Okay, so now let us go for another component. Let me close all of these and let us move on. In the same folder, I will be making a new component as memocomp.jsx. Okay, and to this component, I want to make two states, count1, set count1 is equals to use state and initial value as 0. Similarly, one more, count2, comma, set count2 is equals to use state and initial value as 0. Okay, fine. So this is count1, count2, 0, 0. And what I want to do is same thing. Okay, same thing. Here also I want to display count1 value, count2 value, and may give them a functionality. Okay, so let me write a text here as count1 and let me display its value 0 by passing the state variable count1. Similarly, another one, count2, and let me pass here another variable as count2. Okay, so component is ready. Let me comment the parent comp and let us render memocomp, and you check the output now. You'll get two buttons. One is count1 and one is count2. I hope you have understood this. I've not done anything new here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I want to display. Okay. Sorry. One more thing is left. What is that? Increase in count1 and increase in count2. Correct. So let me make functions for each. First one, let me write increase count1 is equals to one arrow function, and set count1 plus 1. Okay, don't make a mistake here. Okay, it is set count1, and let increase count2 is equals to again one arrow function, and set count2 plus 1. Okay, so pass the respective functions here. First one is increase count, and for the second one it is increase count 2. Okay, now you observe here everyone, as I click on count 1, I can see the count 1 value increases, and as I click on count 2, the count 2 value increases. So nothing new till here. So what additional I want is, as I keep on increasing the value of count 1, okay, count 1, I'm not talking about count 2. Leave count 2 for some time. So as I change the value of count 1, I want to display whether the value of count 1 is even or odd. So how do you check whether a number is even or odd? How do you check if the number is even or odd? What is the condition that you use? Yes, mod of 2, whatever is the value of your count. So you have to do its mod by 2 and then check if its remainder is 0. If its remainder is 0, means the given number is even, and if the remainder is not 0, so can I say it is odd? Yes, I can definitely say it is odd. So for that purpose, what I'll be doing is I will make one function as is even, Okay, make an arrow function here. And what we will do is, let us return count 1 mod of 2 is equals to 0. So now tell me, this function is returning which data type, or what kind of value this function will return you is even? Yes, it will return you a boolean value. Very good. It returns you a boolean value. Why? Because you have returned a condition here. So what it will do, it will check the condition. If the condition is true, it will return you a true value, and if the condition is not satisfied, it will return you a false value. So what we will do is, now this function will either tell me if the count 1 is true, or whether the count 1 is satisfying the condition, or if it is not satisfying the condition. So what I will do is, I will be using a ternary operator here. So for ternary operator, I'll be using JSX expression. So let me call this function here is even. Okay, I'm calling the function and I'm applying operator as if is even is true. So what I have to display, if it is returning me true, what should be displayed? It should display even, right? Correct. If it is true means it is even, or else can I say it is odd? If it is returning false means, can I say the number is odd? Correct. So let us check if it is working. For in front of this, let me just use a break tag. Yes. Now everyone observe, initially the value is 0, so I'm getting even. Now as I increase, can you see, for 1 it is displaying odd, for 2 again even, 3 odd, 4 even, and so on. For each number it will calculate that boolean value and it will display whether the count 1 is even or odd. Understood till here? Okay, so if you have understood till here, please execute this. The remaining thing we will continue in the next class. Okay, everyone, execute this memo comp. Is it done? Okay, so if it is done, we will stop here for today. Remaining things we will continue in the next weekend. Okay, till that, whatever we have learnt, please revise through all of the codes. Okay, because we have done a lot of things and maybe there is a gap, right? So you need to revise everything at once. Okay, so keep on revising. Let us continue in the next session. Okay, so if you have done, you may leave for the day. Have a happy weekend. Bye bye.